Norman Locke has done his homework about Henry David Thoreau and slavery, capturing the essence of both in his sublime novel, A Fugitive in Walden Woods. What he has imagined is the existence of a Negro living in the woods near Walden Pond the same year, 1845 to 1946, that Thoreau lived there, a fugitive slave he imbues with dignity, perception, even humor. Samuel Long has escaped slavery in Virginia, after a violent act of self-mutilation, and, because he is literate, something that was rare for slaves, Locke has enjoined him with the transcendentalists of the era, Thoreau, Emerson, Hawthorne and Garrison, in part because of their stance on slavery. Samuel's owner kept him chained at night, believing that would prevent him from running away. But that assumption is negated in the opening pages of Locke's novel, where he provides his narrator's description of how he chopped off one of his hands with an axe and then cauterized the bloody stump into hot tar, the maiming his badge of courage and freedom. Then the flight north that will be described in detail much later in the novel when Samuel tells his story to William Lloyd Garrison, who publishes it in The Liberator, thus including inside the outer story a mini-slave narrative that describes being shipped in an empty whiskey cask from the south to the north, one stage along the Underground Railroad and one recorded in variants and slave narratives published during the era. It is Ralph Waldo Emerson, in Locke's story, who helps Samuel by employing him to watch over Thoreau from a distance, the year Thoreau embarks on his experiment of living at the pond. Samuel echoes Thoreau, when he states of his stay near the pond, "I wish to be reliant on no one but myself." And his invisibility is furthered when he remarks, "I am not mentioned in his account of his sojourn in Walden Woods. I was not important to his experiment. I might have spoiled the design of his story," i.e., Thoreau's argument of self-reliance. Nevertheless, in this version at Life at the Pond, the two men become close friends, sometimes even taking trips together to neighboring areas. By the conclusion of the narrative, Samuel will have questioned his existence as a runaway Negro, as a free man, pondering some of the same fundamentals that Thoreau brought up in his narrative. It's reasonable to say that the two men become doubles of one another. Late in the narrative, Samuel will state of Thoreau and himself, "We think too much." There are plenty of obstacles for Samuel to overcome in spite of his escape to the north. When he first meets William Lloyd Garrison, who wants to use him as an example, Samuel bristles at the suggestion and informs us, "I would rather have been a miserable field slave than a pet nigger." Later, in the same context, he will observe, "A man gets tired of being the object of other people's goodness." Yet, in spite of his continual exposure to the great minds of the 19th century, Samuel will ponder his own reflective nature numerous times, including the following troubled observation: "My own existence seemed to have no point at all." Initially, I was uncomfortable with Samuel's erudition, his constant references to literary works that he mentions he has read. There's a difference between being literate and familiar with many of the great works of Western literature. That problem is eventually clarified and nullified for me because although his story focuses on the year he spent near Walden Pond, Samuel explains that his later formal education and work for